So the concept of senior proofing a house or a home is first to understand what kind of disabilities that the elderly person would typically suffer from. Now, when I mention about disabilities, I don't mean in a condescending way like being an OKU, but the more on the challenges that an elderly person faces as they start to age. And these disabilities, we can typically group them into five major groups. So the first one would be their eyesight. So as they start to age, their eyesight gets poorer and they tend to not see things that well, especially in times of poor lighting. So in the evening, or if that certain place in the home is poorly lighted, that's where they will not be able to see properly. Also, for an elderly person, their field of view is more narrow compared to an ordinary person, so their peripheral vision is not as well is not as good as a young person, so they might not be able to notice things like wires or clutter on the floor, which typically causes a fall. The second thing, of course, is their stability of their lower limbs. So, an elderly person typically they are a bit more wobbly, and this is due to the weaknesses of their joint and their receptors. So, their ability to perceive stability at their joints is much less functioning compared to a young person, and this actually causes them to have a higher risk of falling compared to a younger person. And the third thing we need to understand is about their bone density. So for an elderly person, typically above the age of 70, if they haven't been taking medications for osteoporosis, it's almost certain that they will have some degree of brittle bones. And the concern about this is that if a fall happens, the risk of them fracturing a bone is much higher than a younger person. Now, the fourth thing is about memory, and this actually is more on the hazards of forgetting things that they have on. For example, if they have a gas stove, very frequently we see elderly persons with dementia when they leave a stove on and they forgot about it. They do their daily chores and or they go out of the home and they forgot to off the stove, and this usually leads to a fire. So one of the very common things that I see when I visit the homes of elderly people with Alzheimer's disease is that they will tell you about oh, their kitchen was burned down and luckily the neighbors actually came and helped them out, or there were pretty a few near misses that they their pot was just burned black. And these are the near misses that would actually hint towards potential hazards or catastrophe that might have occurred uh, and would have occurred if it wasn't for some divine intervention lah. And of course, the final sort of disability is that an elderly person usually has very low uh, limb strength, lower limbs especially compared to a younger person. And due to this weakness of their limbs, they are often not able to actually properly walk or get up from the bed, or actually lift their legs up when they are walking, lift high enough, so it's more easy for them to trip over things that are cluttered around the house. Now, when we take into consideration all of these quote unquote disabilities of an elderly person, so what the home needs to how the home needs to modify itself to overcome these disabilities can also be broadly classified into five main categories. The first one, of course, is improving the lighting. So use brighter bulbs in commonly used areas for the elderly, and especially during the night time, if it's very dark, you can also consider using motion sensor lights in hallways or common places or toilets, for example. The second thing is, of course, to install appropriate handrails and grab bars at the right areas. These are areas where typically the elderly person is either in a semi-squat or a seated position and they want to get up. And these are areas like the bathroom, the toilets, the shower, and also at staircases and also the hallways. Now these are the areas where the grab bar actually helps them in terms of their stability and lower limb strength, so they can actually use their arms to maintain the stability and also to support their lower limbs. Of course, as I mentioned, the third one, of course, is the bathroom safety. So consider shower chair and also a handheld shower head, and also to put non-slip mats around the shower or bathtub area. So this is to prevent, in the event of a fall, if let's say they're feeling unstable and they actually just with these anti-slip mats they are able to reduce the risk of falls. And if they are using a shower chair, the risk of them falling from a standing position is actually much lower as well. And as I mentioned just now about elderly people with dementia or Alzheimer's, having a kitchen safety mechanism such as a automatic shut-off feature of certain tools within the kitchen, or changing from gas stove to induction cookers with a much more higher safety profile, this is very, very much highly recommended. And this is what I usually tell the family members of patients with dementia. And of course, finally, is to just be very much aware of trip hazards around the house. So pathways should be cleared of clutter, any unnecessary wires or rugs, even slippers or shoes that have the tendency to bend inwards should be avoided. And also to secure all kinds of loose carpets and mats, and make sure they have non-slip backing, and also make sure that they are properly lined up so they don't just fold in a way where it causes the elderly person to trip over and fall. So in a nutshell, these are the main considerations for an elderly person with dementia or just frail. And these are the things you can do for a start to senior proof the home.